Dabo Sweeney's approach to the transfer portal is equal parts brilliant and risky.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We do want to, on this episode, discuss the bombshell breaking news today that former Miami commit who ended up signing with Florida, Jaden Rashada, he's now at Georgia. It's a long saga, but former four-star quarterback Jaden Rashada is suing Billy Napier and other top figures in Florida for fraud. How this is going to impact college football and what it says about the NCAA and their lack of oversight. We have a new batch of post-spring top 25 rankings from ESPN. They've got 5 ACC teams ranked in the top 25. I think a couple of those schools are not so happy about the way that played out, though. But, Kenton, we got to talk about Dabo Swinney, who is a man on the island, head coach of Clemson. It's been a big topic around college football. He has a complete opposite approach to the transfer portal from most other coaches, doesn't use it, right? And Dabo had this quote late last week on Sirius XM about his, complete avoidance of the transfer portal, does not use it. He says, it's pretty simple. Most of the guys in the portal aren't good enough to play for us. That's the reality of it. Now, Kenton, before we talk about why this is such a risky approach, I want to talk about why it's brilliant. And in a weird way, I respect Dabo for this, because when you send the message that we do not bring in guys through the portal, he also, doesn't embrace NIL, which kind of ties into that. But when you send that message loud and clear, we do not bring in players through the transfer portal, you're sending a powerful message to the players who are on your roster and the players you recruit that we're not going to replace you with mercenaries. That's essentially what Dabo is saying. Well, when he's recruiting players out of high school, when you come here, if you commit to a lot of other schools, there's the chance that in a year they decide there's a shiny object they like better than you. They're going to replace you through the portal. At Clemson, we're not going to do that. Now, their recruiting class last year was good, not great. They finished number 11, which is respectable. They're trending well early, though, Kenton. We're a long way away from signing day for the class of 2025, of course, but Clemson is trending in the top 5 right now, according to 24/7 Sports. They have the 5th-rated class in the country. There's a long way to go, though. But honestly, I can see how Dabo's approach can really pay off when it comes to your own players, not being disgruntled, and when you recruit.
Donno, your positivity is rubbing off on me, because people tell me I'm too negative and I need to lean into my Alex Donno side a little bit. So I'm going to tap into it. We're going to get positive today. Like two magnets that can't come together, we're going to get real positive today, okay? So let's think about it this way. You're absolutely right in that any player that signs there, it does give that instant boost of, I have not only stability here and safety in my position here, but I have guaranteed development here. Because I think that that's a large part of what the portal has done. And it's empowered coaches who, as Mike Tomlin says, they run away from coaching. If a coach is not good at developing players, at teaching players, at finding ways to reach and connect with all of his players or all of her players or their players so that they understand what the coach is saying. They understand, hey, you need to work a dent rip in this situation. You need to hump the offensive lineman past you when you get to this situation, all that type of stuff. If you cannot teach that, but you can go into the portal and get that, and you use the portal a ton, you are in essence running away from that thing a little bit, just a little bit. That can't be ignored. So yeah. Dabo is choosing hard. He's choosing the harder path, which for a high school player, once you are committed, I'm choosing a staff that chooses me. And that's important. And that's the good side of it. So I'm going to stick with the positivity before I rain on anybody's parade, because I want you to start the raining on the parade, and then I'll make it thunderstorm a little bit. But in all seriousness, it is a very good thing if you're already on the roster, like you said, or if you're a high school commit.
Yeah, but the problem with this, unfortunately for Dabo, I think there's going to be a net negative in the long term for his program is he's putting himself at an uneven playing field, Kenton. It's like if an NFL coach just decided, you know what, we're literally not going to sign free agents and we're only going to draft players, right? But so the problem for Dabo is I know that obviously he's expecting this to improve his retention rate since he's not recruiting over his current players, but his current players still do have the same right as any other player in college football to transfer somewhere else. So in other words, you've got great players on Clemson's roster. There's going to be other programs that are out there as options for them, inducing them. Maybe they want to get a taste of some of that extra NIL that they don't get at Clemson. So if you still have the same opportunity to lose players from your roster and then you refuse to replace them with veteran players and you only replace them with recruits, or maybe you put walk-ons on scholarship, I really do believe that that's putting Clemson in a situation where there's going to be a gradual, if not a rapid drop that's going to put them in an uneven playing field compared to other programs. I respect the philosophy. I'm not necessarily rooting for it to work. I consider myself very impartial and very neutral on this, especially given I cover another program in the conference. I think a lot of people are rooting for this approach to work for Dabo, the old traditionalists who hate NIL. They hate how college football is changing. But just because Dabo's not changing doesn't mean every other program and every other philosophy is changing. If you can lose players through the portal and not replace them, and listen, sometimes you recruit players you think are great, you do whatever you can to develop them, they don't end up being what you thought they were, and then you don't have the option to go and replace those players in the portal. This is too risky for me, Kenton. I respect the approach, but in the long term, I don't think it's going to work.
You know, I think of the show Big Mouth and its theme song where they're singing "I'm going through changes," because that's where college football is. Okay, that's where college football is right now. College football is going through changes, and Dabo Swinney refuses to acknowledge that. This play by Dabo is a queen sacrifice. You are risking, for those of you who don't play chess, it's when you sacrifice your queen in order to go forward and win. But it's a very specific place and time where
I watched that. I don't play chess, but I did watch that show on Netflix, The Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, and this is in essence one of those moments where if this works out, you look like a genius. If this works out, you end up being known as one of the greatest coaches to ever do it. If this fails, you will have to put your dunce cap on. People will talk about you for decades, if not centuries, in terms of, hey, this is the guy who invented, or this is the guy who refused to get rid of the landline. Like it's that type of deal. And so what Dabo is risking here, and I'm glad that he said the word, most players aren't good enough to play here. Objectively speaking, if you are in a Power 4 conference, even if you're not on the upper end of it, yes, a majority of players in the portal are not good enough to play for you. That's de facto true for every school in the ACC. A majority of players in the portal are not good enough to play at Wake Forest. A majority of players in the portal are not good enough to play at Miami. They're not good enough to play at NC State. They're not good enough to play at Boston College. So why am I saying this? It's not about the majority. None of these schools, the power school, the best schools at least, the schools that have consistency, are building their roster mainly through the portal. The portal is used to supplement what you already have. It's like using FanDuel as your main source of income. That's an idiotic idea. That is a terrible idea. It can supplement. It can drop a little lanyard on you if you had the Jokic under 4 assists in Game 7. Sure.
Good call.
Sure. But it's not supposed to be like I'm living off this. So with that being said, most players aren't good enough to play for Clemson. Sure. Was Heisman winner Jaden McDaniels good enough? Or I'm sorry, Jaden Daniels good enough? Was Heisman winner Joe Burrow good enough? Because you didn't have quarterbacks for either one of those guys that you would say, right, oh, my quarterback is far superior to this guy. I feel 1,000% comfortable saying I don't want this guy playing at my school. So it's a big risk in that the other part of this, as much as we talk about those high school players loving to come there, you've been to Clemson, South Carolina, haven't you, Donno?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, I have too. There ain't jack squat in Clemson, South Carolina that you want to go see. If you're not winning championships, those kids will leave. It doesn't matter if you invest in them, they believe in you, you believe in them. At a certain point in time, you have built a culture around winning, around dominating, around being all those things. And once you are no longer those things, It's like how everybody believes, oh, my partner is with me because they love me, and it's not because I'm pretty, or it's not because I'm handsome, it's not because I have money. Lose that thing. Lose it and find out. Find out real quickly exactly why they're with you. Sometimes it's not they're a bad person. It's that those two things are inseparable. No money, no honey, baby. No wins. Yep. They're not going to stick around.
Well, when we come back, ESPN has put out this is no longer the way too early. They have graduated to post-spring, which means more data. Everyone's done with spring football. Transfer portal is mostly finished. There's a few stragglers out there who haven't committed. So ESPN has their post-spring top 25. Are they fair in the way they represent the ACC football programs? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And if you're a small business owner, I already know you're keeping it locked to LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million businesses, small businesses, use LinkedIn for hiring, by the way. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports streaming 24/7 YouTube channel, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. It's called Locked On Sports Today, and it's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs with you. We are free here on the Locked On Sports Network. So Kenton, ESPN has come out with their post-spring top 25. I already ranted about this a little bit on Locked On Canes earlier today, and it's only one specific point that I don't necessarily agree with, but we'll go through the top 5 real quick. By the way, there are no ACC teams in the top 5. They got Georgia at number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Oregon 4, Notre Dame 5. Remember, they're not a football member of the ACC. You got to scroll down to number 11 to find Florida State. NC State is number 13. Clemson at number 16. I'm sure some Clemson fans, even though they have the second best odds to win the conference, are probably not happy to be behind NC State. We will get to that and why that, may or may not be a fair ranking. And then the next ACC team on the list is Virginia Tech at number 21. Miami at number 24. So that was my gripe on Locked On Canes, was that the Hokies, despite the fact that they are about touchdown underdogs or more in the game that they're scheduled to play at Miami in September, Miami's got a higher projected win total. Miami's got better odds to win the conference, more talent on paper, although Virginia Tech does return a lot of talent. So my gripe was Miami at number 24 to Virginia Tech at number 21. But what do you think about the placement of all the ACC teams there, including nobody in the top 10 from the conference?
Here's the thing that I think is so interesting about stuff like this. Mark Schlabach, who I believe wrote this preseason top 25, he's one guy. And although he's a guy who his roots are in the SEC, his roots, I believe he is a UGA grad and covered Georgia and the SEC extensively and all that good stuff. Here's the thing, people. It's the time of the season. It's that time of the year where we're going to start seeing more and more of these. And this one is one of the less clickbaity ones that I've seen, because I've seen some that I'm like, I know what you are. I know exactly what you are. Is any list perfect? No, these are not going to be perfect lists, because guess what? They're working with incomplete data. We have not seen Grayson McCall throw against a defense that is not wearing red and white. We have not seen DJU throw against the defense that's not wearing garnet and gold. We have not seen Cam Ward throw against the defense that's not wearing orange and green. So The reality is very simple here. Are people going to get in a tizzy about this? Yes. But when I look at this list, if somebody was to say, Ken, how close do you think this is to the final rankings in the season? I wouldn't say that this is that far off, because while I believe very much so in Virginia Tech, Miami is the wild card every single year. Every year we're talking about they've got the talent. Can they put it all together? They've got the talent. Can they put it all together? Going into last season, how many projected first rounders were there on that roster, Donno?
I think first rounders, maybe one or two. I mean, Cam Kinchins, people thought would get drafted higher. He ended up a third round pick. I wouldn't say a lot of it. I mean, I think everybody who was drafted and a couple players who weren't were projected higher than they went. But,
right. And that's my point. Me and Candace did an episode last year about how many players were projected to go first round. We pulled together 5 or 6 different sources for like these first round mock drafts. And Miami had like 6 guys across all of them. And it was insane to me. I'm like, wait, 6? This feels a little aggressive. It was somewhere between 5 and 6, I want to say. And the reality is, I knew right when I saw it, I said, that feels a little high. And even with all that talent, can they bring it together? So this is not a dunk on Miami thing. This is all these teams in general. They have things that are great about them. They have things that are very questionable about them. I have talked ad nauseum about the fact that while the game is changing to a more passing game, you just had Jay Naught come into your conference and you still don't have a 300-pound defensive tackle, Virginia Tech.
Dang. Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? Caden Naught, I believe, is the name. But either way.
Oh, no. I think it is Jaden. You were right the first time.
All right. I'm sorry. All these Jadens getting me confused and mixed up. It's too many Jadens. But the reality is simple. That brother can run that pill like nobody's business. You had him come into the conference. You had a Stanford team that has historically been known as a power running team, although they're changing that identity now. They've been known as a power running team. That's been their bread and butter for decades. And that team is coming into the conference, and you have a very light in the behind interior. So all of these teams have questions. How good is Grayson McCall going to be in year 1? How good is DJU going to be in year 1? There are questions for each and every team that is here. And to me, it doesn't make sense to get super worked up about these things, because at the end of the day, this is one guy giving his opinion on where these teams belong. And let me tell you this, the ACC perception is bad across all of the big 3 sports, except maybe baseball. I think baseball is the only place where the ACC gets its proper due. But do y'all see what happens with basketball every year? The ACC gets disrespected, tossed to the side. Oh, they're terrible. Oh, Jordan, they walking through that door. Oh, David Thompson, they walking through that door. Oh, Chris Paul and Tim Duncan, they walking through that. Every year, and yet every year, time after time after time again, what happens when we line up and play the games?
Someone gets into the Final Four every year.
So, with that being said, don't take this, oh my God, nobody in the top 5, nobody in the top 10 is like this is crushing us and it's hurting us. You'll be all right, because you're going to have your day. You know how everybody says we're going to have your day in court. You're going to have your day on the field to lace them up and go show, oh, you think that team's good? Okay, we'll show you. We'll show you exactly. Clemson's going to have their day early. NC State's going to have their day early. Plenty of teams are going to have their day against quality SEC opponents to show this is exactly who we are or who we are not.
Now, I respect everything you said, but I've got one more point that I want to bring up, because when you talk about, fan bases feeling disrespected, whether that's justified or not, what about an ACC team that was left off the top 25 completely? Louisville. I'm sure they're, and obviously they got a lot of mixed headlines for the transfer portal. They brought in a lot of really good players. They lost some really good players in the portal. I know they feel pretty good about their quarterback, Tyler Shuck, but he's got to prove he can get through a season uninjured, I think is the big question mark for him. And that was a team, Kenton, that wasn't really expected to do anything last year, and they overachieved. They got to the ACC championship game. Their head coach is still there, Jeff Brom, who I thought did an excellent job in his debut last year, and they're not even in the top 25. I'm sure they feel dissed by that.
You know what? And I'll say this. Of all the teams who feel disrespected by this list, I think that Louisville has the best case. Because not only is this a team that was in the ACC championship last year, people tend to forget they were the ACC runner-ups last year. And on top of that, they're returning some dynamic talent. Like that just cannot be understated. Again, I cannot understate how much I love Ashton Gelati's game. I really cannot overstate that, rather. I cannot overstate how much I love his game and love watching him on film. So I absolutely think that if any fan base has a gripe with this thing that's legitimate, Louisville fans, my heart goes out to you, okay? Yeah. Because this absolutely can be seen as a slap in the face, or it really is a slap in the face for some of these teams that are on this top 25 to be there and not you. I absolutely understand where you're coming.
Yeah, because like when I looked at it through my Miami perspective, I'm like, they got Virginia Tech ahead of Miami, but then Louisville fans can look, they got Virginia Tech and Miami, and they beat Miami last year. They got them both ahead of us. So it is what it is. All right, so there's a big, huge story that broke this morning in college football. Jaden Rashada, who's now at Georgia, right? So it's not an ACC player. He was originally verbally committed to Miami. He was induced to flip to Florida with the promise of a $13.85 million NIL deal that did not materialize. Jaden Rashada is suing head coach Billy Napier, top Gator booster Hugh Hathcock, and a former Gator NIL director. He is suing them for fraud. What does this say about the NCAA and for the college football landscape moving forward? You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We are not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now, you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brands behind every great investor. YahooFinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes and Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack with you here on Locked On ACC. So Kenton, this I'm reading this morning all about this Jaden Rashada lawsuit. Rusty Hardin, who's a famous sports attorney in Texas, is representing Rashada. So he's got the big guns out. He's got the big guns blazing. He is suing. Yeah, he's suing Florida Gators head coach Billy Napier, top Florida booster Hugh Hathcock, and a former NIL director at Florida. He's suing them for fraud. Now, maybe there's, from the Billy Napier standpoint, maybe there's some he said to this. That's something Andy Staples at On3 pointed out, because Rashada in the lawsuit basically accuses all these parties of knowing this NIL deal, this promise deal, is not going to get paid. This $13.85 million. This is just money. We're going to induce you to come and commit here. We have we're going to renegotiate or cancel the terms later after we have you locked in. Now, obviously, the deal did not materialize, and part of that allegedly was the promise of $1 million just to come and commit here, and a $500,000 signing bonus he was supposed to get on December 5th that was never sent to him. But a couple things that I can't help think about, Kenton. There's a lot to unpack here, obviously, but the NCAA, again, where was the oversight? This is the exact sort of stuff they're supposed to protect student athletes from. They were completely absent from this. Now, about a year ago, the NCAA, notified Florida of an investigation into this. They had to pause that investigation indefinitely because, one of those cases that they lost out there, basically, we don't have the power to regulate this stuff. So The NCAA originally refused to do anything about this kind of thing. Now they can't do anything about this kind of thing. This is just another I don't know why the NCAA just gets that cut of all this TV revenue. When it comes to football, what are they doing exactly? Nothing.
What are they doing? What are they doing? Because this is one of the most embarrassing stories for the NCAA in recent history. And boy, are they many. Boy, are there many. This is so humiliating for not only Florida, but the NCAA as a whole. And I'm going to say this from an ACC perspective. This is a moment for everybody to look around and say, oh, man, we've got to stop playing. We've got to get serious. The NCAA should have already put regulation in, and I've been screaming this since the beginning of this. Hey, you need to find a way for these players to get paid, but for it to be all guarantees. And everybody kept saying, well, that's professionalism. This is professional sports. I'm sorry to tell you. Everybody around the sport is a professional. It's professional sports. The coaches are the highest paid state employees in every state. It's professional sports. They will not let you get a seat at the 50-yard line real close to the team for free. Why? It's professional sports. When you go to the concession stands, those are professional prices. I don't know about y'all. Those are professional prices, baby. So with that being said, I think that this Jalen Rashada thing is a clear example of how the NCAA does not know its head from its behind, because this was an easy slam dunk to go in and say, if you promised this young man something, if there was a verbal agreement, if there was a handshake agreement, if there was any legally binding agreement, it has to be honored. It has to be honored, or you will be on the hook for the same type of thing. I'm not saying to go full SMU death penalty on them, but there needs to be severe penalties behind enticing a student athlete with promises of a certain amount and not giving that. Can you imagine what would happen in the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB if they said, hey, we're signing you to a $168 million contract, and then you got there and they said, actually, it's only 52, sorry. Whoops-a-daisy. That's what it is. So I think that this is one of those moments where, again, every ACC team should be taking note of this, and they should be asking themselves, are we committing some of these same nefarious crimes? Because I agree with Rashada 100%. This is absolutely fraud, and he should also go after him for defamation, because the way that his name was tarnished through the mud, the way that his name was dragged through the mud as if his father was some sneaky, greedy, conniving. If I was them, I'd be getting every dime that I was promised plus some about the game. They might want to rename the swamp after me. They might have to rename the Rashada Stadium after I was done with it.
And so another part of this though is, I wonder how deep this could go in like damaging Florida's program, because I also see a way that Florida could benefit from this, Kenton. Like, because some of the parties in this lawsuit, I think Hugh Hathcock is still involved as a booster, but the former NIL director that was named, they've already disassociated themselves from this person. He no longer works in that capacity. The two various collectives that were involved in this are no longer the collectives that are involved with the Gators. They've moved on to a new collective, but Billy Napier's still there. And so I wonder if maybe the resolution for Florida could be he becomes the sacrificial lamb. Now they can fire him with cause. Maybe. I don't think we're at that point yet, but depending on how this lawsuit progresses, maybe Florida, who's maybe not so keen on Napier anyway, but his buyout is expensive, they can look at this lawsuit and say, hey, now we can fire LinkedIn Billy with cause and not have to pay that buyout. So maybe they benefit from this.
I'm going to tell you what. I'll say this. Word from up in East Lansing, when they got rid of a coach with cause, they were happy to not have to pay a buyout, despite the fact that there was allegedly some very bad traumas created there. If this is a situation where you're not seeing that same type of violence inflicted upon somebody, you still get out of your buyout, I doubt that the folks down in Gainesville will be upset about that. I truly, there's something in me that says that they won't be mad. But again, I think that every team needs to look at this, because now that we are moving to a more direct pay-for-play model, and we're admitting what it is, and we're in essence saying, hey, these players are going to get paid by the university. That's just what it is. We need to truly examine this, because I think that this is a problem that will not only exist under the new model, it may proliferate. It may get worse with teams saying, yeah, come to us and we'll make sure that you sign this deal. And just sign right here. Because these are, when you're talking about guys going to the pros, you're talking about guys who are making so many millions, it makes sense for them to have the best agents, the best financial advisor, the best the money can buy in those regards. It's darn near a family office if you're a first round pick. So, it's going to get to a point where I believe that these high school players need to get representation for themselves as well, because like we're seeing in multiple situations, players are walking into situations that are not necessarily the best for them. And if they are to be deceived or to be said anything that is untrue, they may not have the same recourse as a Rashada, because they may hear one thing and then hear, sign on the dotted line right here, which is a very different number. Well, we told you that the signing bonus would be $200,000 if we didn't get these other 5 stars who were already committed. So I don't know what to tell you. So this is a moment for players and teams going forward to deeply examine, how am I going into the recruiting process? What am I getting out of it? What am I offering into it? And going from there.
Oh, enjoyable show as always. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, like this episode. If you listen to the audio version, Locked On ACC, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we will talk to you again tomorrow. He's Kenton Gibbs. I am Alex Donno. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.